This is homework 5 for POL 242 by MedicineHat 2013. The focus of our research is on liberal perspectives. Throughout the course of the year, we have sought to utilize the data available to us to determine which factors influence an individual's liberal perspective as defined by their egalitarian outlook. We have constructed an index which we believe quantifies egalitarianism by amalgamating questions from the CES 2011 dataset, which measure respondents' attitudes toward gays and lesbians, feminists, and racial minorities. Our rationale for our dependent variable was reliant upon research by Wilm Kimlicka, which stated that a tenet of liberalism is the support for marginalized groups. For this reason, we assume that those individuals with a liberal perspective, as we defined it via egalitarianism, would have a positive attitude towards such types of groups. The reliability analysis for our dependent variable resulted in an acceptable alpha score of 0.8125 and a standardized alpha score of 0.8148. Should any one of the variables be deleted from the index, the alpha score would drop significantly. The mean and mode for our raw index indicate that most respondents scored as having a high liberal perspective. The standard deviation was 64.513, and the results were not highly skewed. Our first independent variable was PES11_89, which measured a respondent's trust of other individuals. We hypothesized that individuals who are more trusting of others are more likely to have a liberal perspective. This was based on research by Morton Deutsch. His paper on the subject of trust states that a liberal political society is reliant upon trust that all members of the society are willing to contribute without taking advantages of the benefits which make up the system. We decided to include a control variable to the independent variable based on research by Belay et al., which states that men are more cooperative than women, both with other men and other women, and thus more trusting. This compelled us to hypothesize that a control variable of gender, specifically men, would result in specification. Our second independent variable was CPS11_11, which measured a respondent's political alignment. Based on research by Greenberg and Jonas, we hypothesized that those who were more left-leaning would be more likely to have a liberal perspective. This was due to the paper's conclusion that parties which are on the right of the political system have been historically less likely to support the rights of marginalized groups, while those on the left have been more likely to support the rights of these groups. As political parties cater to the interests of their constituents, those on the left are more likely to have a liberal perspective, while those on the right are less likely to have a liberal perspective. The third independent variable was CPS11_93, which measured a respondent's income. We sourced research by Peter Valentine, which summarized that because political freedoms and economic freedoms are often in contention with one another, in order for an individual to prioritize their economic outcome, they may have to stand against the acquisition of rights and freedoms for marginalized groups. For this reason, we hypothesized that those individuals in a higher income bracket are less likely to have a liberal perspective. 15% of the variation in an individual's liberal perspective is explained by our independent variables according to the R-squared and adjusted R values as indicated by our multivariate regression analysis. Trust resulted in a B value, which indicates that those who are trusting of others are 32% more likely to have a liberal perspective. The B values for all political parties showed a higher likelihood of liberal perspectives than members of the Conservative Party. To the contrary of our hypothesis, the B value for income indicated that the higher an individual's income, the higher their liberal perspective is. There did not seem to be any major concerns of collinearity in our analysis, as the tolerance levels were all above 0.20 by a wide margin, indicating that there were no concerns with overlapping relationships in the analysis. The closest related concepts were trust and income, which both had a 0.94 tolerance level, indicating a strong disassociation of measurement. We created a multi-model regression table to compare our original data with the results after including our control variable. The tolerance levels for all three variables were higher than 0.20, indicating multicollinearity was not a problem in the regression analysis when our control variable was included. All variables were statistically significant with the exception of male trust. The R-squared and adjusted R-squared values once the interaction term is introduced resulted in an explanation for less than 1% of the variable. The interaction term indicated that being male is a significant negative predictor for being trusting of others. While this disproves our hypothesis that men are more likely to be more trusting, it does prove our hypothesis of specification. The data indicated that while some of our hypotheses and the research we utilized to form them were supported, specifically in the cases of political alignment and trust of others, others, specifically in regards to income and our interaction term of gender and trust, were not. The personal nature of what makes an individual more likely to have a liberal perspective as defined by their egalitarianism means that there are many factors which could be viable independent variables. It was for this reason that we chose to include trust, which was not necessarily a common association with the liberal perspective. The emotional aspect of egalitarianism is one that cannot be ignored when researching the topic. It implies that in order to increase liberal perspectives on a societal and political level, there is a requirement to focus on imploring individuals to look beyond their personal experiences and instead focus on the value of the support of marginalized groups. Further research should be aimed towards which factors allow to increase an individual's liberal perspective as opposed to those that contribute to them. It is our belief that a society which is more accepting of marginalized groups is one which is able to function more congruently, and thus we see further research in this direction as societally valuable.